All right, good morning, everybody. This is the sixth episode of Web's Webinar Wednesday. That's a series of webinars where we talk about commercial challenges in these times of COVID-19. My name is Thijs van Rosmalen. I'm responsible for business development at Webs. We are a B2B marketing and sales agency helping B2B organizations generating more demand and more leads for their commercial process. And we are an elite partner of HubSpot. That's the tool we use to do this. Like every week, we have an expert as guest. And today we have Martijn Verschoor from HubSpot. Martijn works at HubSpot for just a little bit over 3 years now. Started as a BDR, turned into BDM and account executive right now. And he's running for President's Club this year. What is his expertise? He is our main guest of today since he knows how to fill a pipeline on remote. While we start working from outside sales into inside sales overnight a couple weeks ago, that's what he is used to. He works on remote, building a strong pipeline and drives amazing growth for HubSpot by selling software to B2B organizations in the Benelux. So I'm very happy that Martijn will join us today. If you are joining us for the first time, I will explain some rules of these webinars. As you noticed, you're all muted, so your chat is your biggest friend. If you have any questions for Martijn or for me or for the group, please share them in the chat pane. I will manage all the questions, and at certain points in this presentation, Martijn will have time to answer the questions live. If we can't answer all your questions this upcoming hour, no worries. At 11, you will get an invite in your email and you can book Martijn or myself to talk about your questions if we didn't answer them yet. So, welcome everybody. I am in my home office in Den Bosch. Happy it's sunny here outside, so please share in the chat pane where are you located, and if I say good morning, or maybe I have to say good afternoon or good evening, I'm not sure. Last time we had even people from India joining us. So in the chat pane, where are you located, and say good morning to everybody. Make yourself known, please. And then I have my introduction done, Martijn, and I will go over to you. Welcome to this webinar, Martijn.
Great, awesome. Thanks for the intro, Thijs, and welcome everybody. I'm excited to be here this morning and be able to hopefully share some of my experiences thus far with everybody that's attending here today. See a good group of about 50 or so people, and hopefully I can walk you guys through a little bit of what my expertise is, a little bit of my experiences so far, and hopefully make sense of how best to tackle what the current situation is around the world. I'm going to just start my presentation and go to the homepage. Thijs, can you just confirm for me that this is all working on your end as well?
Yeah, I'm seeing pipe generation and I've spotlighted you, so you're good to go.
All right, perfect. Cool. So, like Thijs mentioned, the aim really for the next, I would say, 35, 40 odd minutes or so, depending on how much time we need to get back to some of you guys for questions, is to hopefully highlight a few of the noticeable changes that we've measured on the side of HubSpot over the last couple of weeks, if not months, but also to try and put a little bit more emphasis on not just what has worked for me or the sales organization on the side of HubSpot over the last couple of years, being a predominantly inside sales driven organization, but also what type of effective strategies could potentially be applied to your day-to-day process to keep that consistent growth that you've got in mind, but also to sort of meet the ambitious targets that you've either been set from higher up or that you have as a managing director or sales individual yourself. Let me just get the presentation started. So the agenda really for the next 45 minutes or so, and I've split this into predominantly two main categories, is to first of all highlight what some of the general metrics are that we've noticed on the side of HubSpot. hopefully get you thinking a little bit critically about the situation as is, but also what the future may hold in store. And aside from that, dive a little bit deeper into what I like to call leveling up your pipeline generation and give you some examples with some recommendations and strategies that could potentially be applied to your use case and benefit you. As a slight disclaimer, my expertise and my experience so far predominantly revolves around selling the HubSpot product, so a SaaS focused product. So it may not be applicable in every single use case that you have, but hopefully you can pick up a few pointers here and there that might be original or new to you that would make sense for you to apply to your overall strategy. So let's actually get started with just a short introduction of myself. Thijs already mentioned that I've been working at HubSpot for about 3 years. I just hit that 3-year landmark, which is quite special or long in the lifetime, I should say, for an individual at HubSpot. I started in 2017 as an inbound sales coordinator. If you would call the 1-800 HubSpot sales line at that point, I would be one of 2 people in Europe that would pick up the phone or respond to the chats online. Made a quick transition to business development, and then after that into an account executive role, which has been my role for the last year and a half, almost 2 years now. So let's actually start with what some of the impacts have been of COVID-19. And I'm going to be predominantly referencing some of the data that we've collected, not just from our own metrics as a company at HubSpot, but also what we've noticed in the usage of our tool, our platform, that our 70,000 plus customers around the world have been doing or been applying as a reaction to the global shift towards a fully remote, fully distance, or fully from home type of company. And I'm going to be making use of predominantly a few graphics that will hopefully visually present what I'm trying to illustrate here. So let's start off with some general facts. At its core, we can all agree that COVID-19 has fundamentally affected the way that business is done. And what I predominantly mean by that is that there has been a very clear shift to an increased reliance and dependency on digital presence. So if you look at recent publications by the likes of organizations such as McKinsey, Accenture, and the like, and these types of consultancies, they've all emphasized the fact that around 90% of businesses that had some kind of digital strategy as a component of their overarching business have made a double down or a significant reinvestment in trying to improve their digital presence, to leverage that as a new source of revenue, but also as a means to engage and follow up with the people that they deem relevant in order to keep the business afloat. As a secondary point, being remote has become the new standard for working. Everyone that is probably logged in right now is either working from home or is working in an office that has drastically dropped in the number of people in it at the same time. And what we've noticed from that is that there has become an increased self-reliance and also the need to be able to be a more rounded out expert on the topics or the products that you try and sell. Another one is that there has never been a better time or more time ever to focus on the job at hand, seeing as a lot of what we do on a daily basis is now shifting to what has to happen at home. A lot of people have children or other needs and things that need to take care of at home. And that means that if the time that you set aside for work is being spent on work, you need to double down and be able to focus more. But a great factor or a great impact or great facilitator to the current situation is that we already live in a digital age, and that for the vast majority of people that were impacted in Western or developed countries, I should say, it was a relatively easy switch to switch over to a more digitalized strategy. There's actually a very interesting graphic that was shared with me about a week or two ago, which showed an overall chart of the ease of transition to a fully remote economy amongst 50 of the highest economies in the world. And unsurprisingly, and it's something that I can probably recognize as well, as I am Dutch, the Netherlands was in the top right corner of one of 2 or 3 economies globally that had the easiest time to switch to a full remote system. So let's actually start with some of the metrics that we've analyzed on the side of HubSpot. And I've collected about 3 or 4 different ones that will hopefully illustrate what the situation is currently. These graphics, just to give you guys a basic understanding of what's being shown to you, is a transition from a pre-COVID benchmark, which is about the week of the 24th of February up until now. And this is sort of a measurement that takes place every single week. This graph gets updated every single week by our HubSpot marketing and business intelligence team to illustrate what a shift could be and what the trend is going to a normalization of pre-COVID numbers, or also what the impact or the fluctuation is as time goes on. Specifically on this graph, we actually see a change in the total deals created and total deals closed versus a pre-COVID benchmark. And what we simply mean by that is that we try to understand exactly what type of impact COVID is having on sales organizations around the world, at HubSpot, but also on our own customers. And it's very clear to see that ever since the formal recognition that there has been a need for lockdown, that there has been a steep decline in the amount of deals created, but also the amount of deals closed. And the deals created is the orange bar, and the deals closed is the black line. However, there has been a slight uptick over the last couple of weeks. A lot of people at HubSpot have been saying that this is enthusiastic or positive. However, I, with a sort of more of a statistics and analytical background, beg to differ, because we experienced the same thing after a few weeks here, and it dropped again. So there isn't a clear trend here, but there is some sign that maybe we're going into a normalized or more stabilized pattern. Here's another graphic, and this one specifically revolves around the total amount of emails sent versus opened compared to a pre-COVID benchmark. Now, it shouldn't surprise any of you, with the increased time and availability to go online and the reliance to go to websites to do our research for whatever reason, that there has been a significant increase in the amount of marketing emails that have been sent to people everywhere around the world. And this has gone up really, really quickly. And if you just think back of what the situation was when you actually first self-quarantined or went into lockdown, you probably noticed that you spent more time online. You maybe signed up for a few more newsletters. But aside from that, you probably went online to purchase a few practical items that you would normally go into town for, that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do now as everything is closed. So this also is a clear reflection of the situation everywhere around the world. And you see that in that department, regardless of how much time goes over it, it just keeps going up. And one thing that is quite noticeable is the amount of emails that are being opened. Now, a possible explanation from the side of HubSpot that we could use to understand this number specifically is that marketing teams around the world are also getting smarter, and they're understanding exactly what is leading to a higher open or success rate, and thus either changing the titles or making the content of the emails more relevant and attractive for the individuals. And let's compare that to what's actually happening in sales organizations around the world that are using our tool, but also similar solutions. And this is actually something that's quite surprising if you compare it and contrast it to the previous graphic. What you see here is the amount of sales emails sent, but also the amount of sales email responses. So people that actually get back to the original sender of that message. Unsurprisingly, the moment that lockdown started, everybody had more time to work from home. There's no gatekeepers anymore because no one's simply at the office. So what do you do to sort of compensate for this difference or the inability to get on the phone and call to those individuals? You start to send emails, because that's just the go-to alternative if someone doesn't pick up the phone, myself included. And you see that this trend has been going on for a number of weeks, and the overall volume in email sends has been going up higher and higher and higher. But surprisingly, the amount of emails that have actually been opened or responded to is significantly lower. Now, there's a few possible explanations for this. First of all, salespeople inherently have a tendency to be pushy, myself included. This is something that I recognize, and that probably the majority of other people that work in sales that are present today recognize as well. However, this doesn't usually translate very well when you're trying to have a more soft or more sensitive approach, especially when you're dealing with people that are either working full-time from home or have to deal with another set of situations that revolve around their presence being at home that they might have to take care of. So I find it personally kind of strange that when you look at the overall activity or interactions with marketing emails, which for whatever reason seem to be more intuitive, have a higher response and interaction rate, that sales messages and sales emails and the response rate is staying steadily low. You'd almost expect that with an increase of sales emails, if the conversion rate stays the same, that number would go up as well compared to a pre-COVID benchmark. However, it seems to be on a downward trend and nobody really understands what's going on. So hopefully I can give you a little bit of an insight into what you could do to either mitigate this risk or adapt to this new strategy. And the last point that I also want to highlight, and that would probably be a good indicator for the fact that people are still interested or do really want to engage with people digitally, is this graph. And what this illustrates is the total number of conversations compared to a pre-COVID benchmark. And what we define as a conversation is an individual that visits a website, engages with an automated bot or a live chat on the website, or engages with the company through Facebook Messenger. And what we've noticed, unsurprisingly, is that this has gone up significantly compared to a pre-COVID benchmark, and that people have had a higher need to actually ask questions and get more information and content from the website. Now, this goes hand in hand, of course, with the increase in marketing emails. And this does also highlight the fact that there is a higher dependency on remaining online and engaging with people. So then again, the question becomes, how can we recognize this not just globally, but for the companies where you guys work individually, and translate this into a successful but also sustainable response from a sales motion perspective in order to try and engage these people and follow up and try to keep that benchmark at the same level as pre-COVID. The last graph that I really want to highlight and illustrate to you guys before we start to answer the first questions that might have come up is this graphic. Now, this is something that has been shared by a few of us over at HubSpot. I know that a few of the guys over at Webs have posted this on their social media as well. But this is sort of a natural response graphic to an incident or a shift in the global climate like COVID-19. And what you actually see is that the moment that there is a shift in the way business is done, there's a steep ingress in the amount of work being conducted or results being generated. And that's because we really go into this survival mode. As a response, and it's human nature, we try to adapt to these new settings and new surroundings, and we try to apply a new strategy overall with the ambition to go back to that old normal, but ultimately sort of facilitate the growth towards a more stable and more sustainable future as well by applying these new strategies that we learned. Now, the big question is that's on everybody's mind is, how far along this curve are we? Are we still in that survive phase? Are we already post-adoption? And are we growing again? Based off of the metrics that I've been able to gather over the last couple of weeks, but also in preparation for this presentation, when you look at the current situation, I honestly believe that we're currently at this pre-adoption situation. And the reason why I'm saying this is that there has been a recognition or normalization of what the current work situation is like around the world. But as a consequence, people are only just now starting to adopt new strategies, new ways to work, and that mindset and that consciousness to apply a new system or new way of working to what they do on a regular basis is only starting to sink into people. So we're not going into that growth stage yet. The question that follows up from this is, what's going to happen next? How long will we stay in this adopt phase, or what else is going to happen? And there's three possible scenarios that could take place. We could go straight into this growth phase. That might be a very realistic possibility. But we could also linger in this adoption phase. And there's a number of different factors that could influence this. I don't want to go into too much detail, but there are some things that could potentially influence the latency or the lag period within this stage. Another possibility, of course, is that we go down and drop back into a survival stage. If for whatever reason there's some type of second wave that takes place, we have to go into lockdown again for a longer period, or for whatever reason, other outside factors outside of our control negatively influence what it is that we're trying to do. The one thing that we do need to mention here is that if you adopt a strategy, you'll most likely be at that equal level or go back up versus regressing back into that slump before going up again. So these are just the metrics that we've measured so far. I want to take a moment to maybe get back to you guys on some of the questions that have been submitted before we dive into the second portion of the webinar. So I don't know how you want to go about this, Thijs, if you have specific questions that you'd like me to address or bring up.
Yes, thank you, Martijn. There are some questions for you. You showed some trends on emails and conversations, but Edwin is asking, do you also see a trend in calls made or registered in HubSpot? Like, how is that going? Are people more willing to answer the phone now, or is it harder to get in touch with them since they're at home? Or
yeah, so there's a few things that are coming into play. Like at its base, like if you look at the overall metrics, and I'm just looking at the sales teams here in EMEA, we actually see that there has been a steep decrease in the amount of connected calls. So the calls attempts that we try to register or maintain within the system has stayed relatively level because we just have a certain strategy, but the success rate of those calls has gone and down significantly. And that's to be expected because the majority of times when people leave their phone number online, they leave their business phone numbers, and seeing as no one's in the office, it's harder to get through. However, if people do leave their cell phones and they have a conversion online and they want to be contacted directly via phone, 9 out of 10 times people now just submit their cell phone. So you have a higher success rate in that department. The only thing that you need to be aware of is that there's no real starting or end date or moment anymore in people's daily work routine. So just because you call somebody on their cell phone and it's a direct connection, that might not necessarily mean they're available, because a lot of people nowadays have to take care of their children, and you have to accommodate that as well. So there's a few factors that you have to take into consideration.
Yeah, I can imagine that from my own experience. Another question regarding the offers you made. So once you send out an offer, is that time shorter or longer between sending the actual offer and closing the deal at this period of time?
Good question. So that's something that I'm actually going to get back to a little bit later, but it all has to do with the preparation leading up to that actual signing. So it's actually very important, more now so than ever, to be very diligent in the preparation to get a deal closed and signed. And the reason for that is that we're not in the same office anymore. And if there's multiple people that need to get it approved, it might need to be sent and forwarded to a whole bunch of people. The best way to get ahead of that is to just have a very clear understanding of what the process is on the side of that prospect, of the people that want to close a deal, so that you can actually speed up that process when you get to that point. So before you just send out an email to what you assume to be the decision maker, you need to have clarity on, is this person the person to sign this? Are they the only person? If not, do the other people know that this is coming down the pipe? Do they understand what needs to take place, what the process is to sign this? And do they also recognize that there might be a certain time limit by when an action needs to be conducted? So these are things that you usually want to get ahead of fairly early on in a sales process anyways, but now so more than ever, it's very important to double down on this so that you can just go through it fairly quickly and speed up that process. So the direct answer to the question is, once you get to that stage, and I've noticed it myself, it goes faster because you're in direct contact and people are ready and waiting. The trickier part is being aware of that ahead of time in a way that you can manage it successfully.
Okay, cool. And regarding webinars performance, like a question, do you have some numbers on webinar performance via the GoToWebinar integration maybe? Are we reaching a saturation point with this tool? It's a question of time.
Yeah, so there, I don't have the exact numbers on
Mm-hmm.
the success rate of webinar, but I know that from the conversations I've had with some people on the marketing team here at HubSpot, that there
Mm-hmm.
has been a huge increase in the amount of attendees for webinars. A perfect example is that a couple of weeks ago, one of the directors who's in charge of HubSpot's yearly conference, Inbound, in Boston, she hosted a webinar on how to switch over to a digital event strategy,
Mm-hmm.
and something like that actually drew a couple hundred attendees, whereas in the past you might get maximum 100 or so. So there is a clear need, a clear hunger on the side of people to engage with this type of content. It's usually a very accessible form to gather information and engage with people. And I don't think we've reached that saturation point yet. I haven't heard any sounds or read any reports, because it's still a relatively new alternative to just going to a sales or business meeting, where you can actually walk away from and hopefully learn a few tricks.
Yeah, yeah. Regarding the web's webinar Wednesdays, we normally did this with breakfast sessions offline, discussing such topics or having to meet each other. Attendees were about 20 to 30 each breakfast session. This is we in the past weeks we hosted 5 webinars that represents already 500, a little under 500 attendees. So yeah, from our experience, there's a lot more interaction, a little higher no-show rate with a webinar, but still great interactions. And yeah, so time, I would definitely recommend start hosting webinars for your ideal um, target group or your ideal audience. Edwin had another question. You shared some sources, or you referred to some sources and graphics, Martijn. One of them was the ease of transition to a fully remote economy. Is that something you can share, those reports or those things?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't have the graphic itself in my presentation, but I can send that on to you and the
Yeah,
team
yes,
over at Web
please.
so that you can pass it on internally.
Yeah. Okay, so Edwin will get you covered by sending some resources in the follow-up email later today. All right, no more further questions for now. Please continue, Martijn. We're still
All right,
good with time. We're halfway time now.
perfect. All right, so now it's about really maintaining your pipe generation, and I'll be using a few of my experiences and providing a few recommendations to you guys as well. So let's actually start off with the word that's being thrown around the most nowadays, especially in sort of SaaS sales, and that's the word empathy. Empathetic sales, selling with empathy, however you want to use it. And what's really meant by that is that you sell with a little bit more emotion or understanding for what is happening on the side of the individual or the organization that you're dealing with. A lot of people are in a fairly new situation, maybe a slightly uncomfortable situation, bad internet connection, kids at home. You maybe have household animals walking over the keyboard and that type of stuff. It all sort of generates a distraction, but it does mean that you have to be a little bit more flexible in your sales role and accommodate these types of changes. In my perspective, I see empathetic sales nothing more as consultative sales 2.0. Consultative sales is sort of the approach that we have on the side of HubSpot, that we really try to create a recommendation based off of the needs of the end user. And one of the ways that we go about this is to have sort of a 3-step plan to try and relay information back to the people that we're speaking to. Every time a certain challenge or obstacle is being raised, we go about it in 3 different steps. First of all, acknowledge that this is there. Even if it's not the case on our side, it is the case for the one that we're speaking to, and we need to recognize that fact. But we don't leave it at that. We usually investigate what the root cause of that is, and we respond to that based on the information that's being shared with us. So that actually allows us to go deeper into what is the underlying factor for potential roadblocks and hurdles, and allows us to get a lot of clarity and a lot of information on what is going on the side of the prospects that we try to deal with. This is actually a 3-step plan that I was very skeptical about myself in the beginning, but the moment I started applying it to people, now that everybody's working remote or in lockdown, you actually realize that you have a lot more meaningful conversations with people that facilitate sort of the creation of good rapport and create the ability to be able to position your solution, your product, your services in a much more meaningful and applicable way once you understand what is going on the side of the individual. And that leads me into my next point. And I already used the word, but that's rapport. Rapport, rapport, rapport. Now, so more than ever, it has never been more important to connect with the people that you're talking to on a daily basis on their level. What I simply mean with that is that according to the reports and the analytics that are being published by companies such as Gong, who are a sort of a chat transcript analytics company, they actually analyzed sales conversations from companies all over the world. They've recognized that individuals that are going through a sales motion, be it during a connect, discovery, a demo, or deep dive and a closing call, negotiation call, that spend roughly around 15-16% more time on rapport now than pre-COVID benchmarks, have a higher close rate on the deals that they're working on. And the simple reason that they give for this is that now that people are at home, it's much easier to sort of have that conversation of what is it like in your house? How's the internet connection? How are the kids doing? Have you noticed anything strange? It gives a much more personal flavor and spin on that work-related conversation that you're having, and is having a net positive impact on the overall success rate of people closing out the deals that they're working on. This doesn't just apply to deals that are going on now, but also for potential deals or pipe generation that you're focusing on for the coming months or for the rest of the year. If people go back to a normal way of working and you already have that rapport built in the past from you being a understanding, a caring, and empathetic sales professional, however you want to frame it, they'll be most likely to come back to you because they recognize the fact that you understood the situation that they were in, and they'll see you as a trusted individual to go back to. And that's something that we really hammer on working at HubSpot in the sales department. Another question that has come up quite a few times over the past is, of course, now that everybody is working remote and that it's unclear which companies would be relevant or not, the question comes up, who should we target? Who should we go after as the sales organization is shifting to a fully remote? Now, this is something that we try to do anyways at HubSpot, but now so more than ever, one great way to actually create pipe generation for the future is to look at closed lost opportunities that you have in your sales pipeline. Every company, every sales org around the world has this, and it's usually a great source of just looking at a way to re-engage with individuals that were interested in the past, and also to check in with them on a more personal level and try to re-instigate or breathe new life into that conversation. You'll be very surprised to see just how many people actually change their mind about maybe wanting to use your services or your expertise if you have had a closed lost opportunity with them between now and the last 6 months, because a lot of things have changed probably for them, and maybe they have more time now than in the past to actually make use of what that product is that you're trying to sell to them. Another very important thing is to actually go after decision makers. My sales manager here at HubSpot has made a very clear and strong point about the fact that we as a sales team for Benelux only speak to decision makers. And the reason for that, very simply put, is that it cuts all the noise out of the process now more so than ever, and enables you to actually go straight to the source and identify who the people are that could actually use the tool and make a decision on it or not. Now that the decision makers are actually working from home, it's actually easier to connect with them because you don't have to worry about the gatekeepers, about the receptionists that sometimes think that they're more powerful than the security guards outside the building and stop you from talking to the individuals that you're trying to reach anyways. You can go straight to them, throw out a line, and get connected with them so that you have a conversation. Another thing to focus about when you're looking at targeting, it's probably for some of you guys a better time than ever to go after those bigger deals that would maybe move a little bit slower if things were normal. And the reason why I'm saying this is that, again, because people are working from home and you have a very focused and targeted approach, you probably have a higher success rate, which would mean that you could potentially move things along a little bit faster than usual. I don't want to go into too much detail here because there's a few factors that influence this contextually for each and every single one of you, but that's something definitely to think about. And another great source of potential deals is to just simply look at your install base. Who are our existing customers and who are the ones that we could actually double down on, sell back into, because they're already using our products anyway. The dollar retention increase for an actual customer is much, much higher than somebody that's starting out from scratch. I know from my own experience, if I look at my success over the last couple of months, that the vast majority has come from my install base because they were using the platform anyway. It was a great, easy, open door to just launch that investigation and conversation into. So how do you actually find these prospects? That's the next step. Well, there's a few different strategies, and I want to go through this fairly quickly because I'm going to come back on it later. But it all comes down to being able to leverage and use your digital tools. So lean heavily on the marketing team, lean heavily on the digital solutions that are being used by your organization. A solution or a product like HubSpot, where you have a full suite of tools that can really tell you from A to Z who is coming on the website, what are they looking into, what is the behavior that is being shown, and how to leverage that into an actual conversation, would facilitate the identification and, by consequence, the creation of good sales opportunities. And what we simply mean by that is that if you understand that there's an increase of traffic on the website, but you know who these people are and what they're looking at, it gives you a really great starting point to pick up the phone or send a personalized email to try and get that person stimulated and instigate them to engage with you on a phone call or on a Zoom meeting or something comparable. Another great way to actually find the prospects is just to simply look through your old conversations. It's probably a good exercise for each and every single one of you guys to do. Just look at your inbox and look at personalized one-to-one email conversations that have been sent anywhere prior to the last 2-3 months back. And that probably has to do with a lot of closed loss conversations, but it might be a great way for you guys to just send an open-ended email, check in with the people that you had a relationship built up with in the past, and see how things were going. Same thing goes for your territory plan. What are sort of the long-term gains or plans that or goals that we had in mind, and how can we lay the seed now that I know that the decision makers might be more accessible and open to a general conversation that I can leverage further down the line and have a better result at the end of the year. And then another way to actually find good prospects is to maybe understand and analyze where some of the more unexpected leads come from. A great example for this is that we've noticed on the side of HubSpot that there has been a huge increase in companies that are specializing in e-learning and e-learning solutions. So these are people that have a great opportunity at this time to be able to get more people using their solution, but they of course want to reach out to them. HubSpot facilitates this, and this is something that we've recognized. So we've doubled down on this and tried to drive opportunity creation in that department more so than usual. And let's get into an actual example now. So you try to reach out to an individual, you want to go about it in a certain way, and they're not picking up their phone. So what do? You send an email. Like the graph showed, there has been a significant increase in the amount of emails sent over the last months. And I want to actually start off with this email. This is an example of what not to do. Let's put it that way. When you actually go into Google and you type in bad sales emails, this is one of the first things that you get. And I thought it was particularly poignant because it was sent from somebody at HubSpot. I don't know what the context is. I don't know what the time that this was sent, but judging from the way that certain things are phrased, it could be from quite a few years ago. I don't need to get into this. I think it's fairly clear for every single one of you, but there's a few things in there that you clearly don't want to do. Don't send just a generic sales email to people. No one's going to respond for it because we have that acute spam filter in our minds where we can just pick this apart very quickly. What you actually want to do is go over to a more personalized approach. And I actually want to make use of an example from a conversation that I had last week. And this was actually off the back of, again, an older conversation that I had with an individual about 3 or 4 months ago. Wasn't the right time. There are other things at play, but I actually noticed that this person was back on the HubSpot website. They were doing research. They were re-engaging with content, which led me to believe that they were maybe shifting the way that they thought about it. So I sent a more personalized email, and I got a response fairly quickly with a request to maybe meet at a time that would suit me. Now, the one thing that is important to highlight is that I came across this when I was in the process of checking things out. I set about an hour aside for myself to be able to investigate and do this. And if you look at the time right here, you see that I sent this email towards the end of that hour block that I set for myself in order to conduct this activity. But if you look at when they actually responded, 4 minutes later. Now, usually you don't really get a response that fast from people if you send a sales email. But one of the things that actually I want to highlight with this is that by shifting to a more personalized email, I'm a victim of sending out templates, sequences, automated emails, that stuff as well. But shifting to a more personalized email where you custom write everything that is more applicable to the individual, you actually have a higher success rate. Now, I know that this is just one example and it doesn't set the trend, but this is actually something that I've noticed quite often off the back of a different strategy, a different approach that I've applied over the last number of weeks. And this might be something that would be worth your time to apply and maybe try out with a couple of those individuals, companies, or deals that you have in the back of your mind that you really want to get on the phone with. And again, it's in the interest of pipe generation, not just for now, but in the future. Another great way to reach out, and I know that there has been a webinar hosted by Yaniv on this with the guys over at Webs, is to make use of video. Everybody gets bombarded by emails nowadays, sales or marketing. How do you stand out from the crowd? You simply send a video. Vidyard is one of the tools that is available to you. It's a great example of a tool or a platform that you can leverage to make personal emails. It speaks much more to the individual, and it's also a great opportunity now to really cut the noise out and really stand out from the crowd. And one thing that I really want to highlight is that it's very easy to fall into a regular flow when using these videos. Don't be afraid to go to the extreme and get very personalized and tailored, because ultimately that would make that individual more likely to respond to you. And one thing to bear in mind, and this is something that's particularly true for decision makers that you're trying to engage with, is to have that grass is greener, is always greener mindset. And that simply means that usually managing directors or decision makers at company are a curious bunch. They always want to know what the people or the competitors in the building next door to them are doing, especially if you're in the same industry or trying to sell a competitive product to them. And by actually leveraging your position as a consultative individual that is an expert in a specific industry or a product, and you're engaging with a lot of similar people with a relatable profile, by leveraging this in those conversations, you actually have a much higher conversion rate into a unique or good value opportunity that you could leverage some point down the line. That was it for now. I'm going to take it a step further in a moment, but are there a few questions? I'm just mindful of the time, so I want to make sure that we address some things if possible.
Yeah, there are no questions in the chat pane. Quick question from me. You showed a best practice email on how to get in contact with somebody. What if that person didn't respond in 4 minutes? What is the best practice on number of outreaches you would use in that scenario?
It really is case by case, but I know with this individual, they were the decision maker at the company, and this is a sort of an account that I'd marked as me wanting to sell into them. So what I typically do, and that's again the advantage of using a solution like HubSpot, you can see if there's an engagement once you send a message like that. I want to see if there's a certain type of response or reaction to that email that would prompt me again to double down and follow up with them. And ideally, I wouldn't try to send them an email every day, but maybe a week later, send another email, set a reminder for myself and say something along the lines of, again, I just wanted to make sure everything was clear on my side. How are things on your end right now? What can we do to maybe pick up the conversation again?
All right. Please continue. We have 16 more minutes, so
Perfect.
finish with a bang.
Sounds good. All right, so let's actually start off or continue with a few of the most important points and to really make your sales process, your sales strategy overall a little bit better, a little bit stronger. The first one, and again, this feeds back into that empathetic sales type of strategy, is to really try to apply now more so than ever a little bit of humanity in that process. Don't just go through the motions with the interest of, okay, I need to get a whole bunch of deals and opportunities created because I need to backfill my pipeline. Yes, to a certain extent, that's true, but there's no point in creating deals and creating opportunities if there's an absolutely horrible low conversion rate to them actually becoming a closed won customer. If you're just going through the motions for the sake of hitting certain metrics, you're not going to get to the desired result. And only by applying that humanity and by applying that active listening and sales hygiene mindset, in the sense of understanding what they're going through, understanding what it is that they're looking for, and the possible use case and application of what your product is, are you able to get to that point? Now, I know it's nothing revolutionary or groundbreaking, but I know that salespeople inherently have this disposition to try and forget about this fact when they're going through the motion. And the reason for that, simply put, is that you always have this number in the back of your mind that you need to reach, and that's really distracting from the fact that you, at the end of the day, are a human being yourself, and that you want to try and have a meaningful conversation with the people that you're engaging. So one of the things that you always want to try and do is to try and really match the cadence of the individual and their needs on their side. If someone tells you on the phone, listen, I've got a whole lot of other things on my plate, it's simply not the right time, don't be afraid to acknowledge that again, investigate it, understand why they need that time, what they're looking to change during that time, maybe what the result of that more time phrase would be, and how best to incorporate that challenge or that pushback with your aims of maybe selling into that account. And that would actually lead potentially to another different type of conversation where you could position a follow-up call at some point down the line and try to create a deal at some point that would make sense for everybody. Another factor that a lot of people can emphasize now more so than prior to this is the emphasis and the recognition of a surplus of time. Everybody always says, I'm running out of time. I don't have time for this. I don't have time for that. I don't have time to investigate this. Try to stand out from the crowd again and really highlight the fact why your expertise, your product, your services are valuable, especially now. People usually have the ability now to double down and upskill themselves more so than before, because there's less distractions, less noise coming from other things that need to take place in the office. And even if you're working from home, in the downtime, a lot of people have the availability to just try to become experts on certain topics or the products that you're trying to sell. So focus not just on what you need to get things across now, but also the people that you want to speak with. And what I mean with that is focus on reaching the right individuals that could have a positive impact on that conversion rate to a closed won opportunity, and really try to emphasize that upskilling element within that sales process, where in the past you were just focused on getting them on the next call. One thing that's really important, and I think the Hulk is a great metaphor for it, is that you actually need to turn into this lean green monster when it comes to understanding what the sales process is like and trying to lean out the sales process. And I actually want to start off with the last bullet, which is cut off the fat. And what I simply mean by that is don't get stuck up on potential hopes and dreams when it comes to deals right now. There is no point in wasting time on individuals or companies that have simply no means, no budget, no urgency whatsoever on their side to make use of your product. Everybody's going through the same motion, and the very simple fact that people are trying to focus their time and energy more on things that matter means that you should do the same when it comes to your sales motion. So one of the first things that I try to identify now more so than ever is the urgency on the side of the individual that wants to engage with me. If somebody wants to make use of HubSpot, we have a great freemium product. If I realize or recognize that they're simply not a fit to dive deeper into our more premium tools, without being annoying or mean about it, I tell them, you've got time to upskill yourself in that department, make use of those tools that are available to you, and we'll get back to you when it makes sense and you feel like you're ready to take the next step. And that simply allows me to shift my focus to the companies and the organizations and the individuals that would actually allow me to create not just a deal, but a good deal, and a deal that I know that something is there. And also a very important part, and this is again feeding back into the question that was asked earlier when it comes to deals and the signing process, is that you need to have a very clear understanding of what the next steps are and what an action plan is with the individual. Most of the time, there's multiple decision makers, multiple people that need to be looped in on the side of the individuals that you're creating a deal with. By getting ahead of that and highlighting that fact early on in your sales process, especially now, you have more time to create a mental flow chart of who you need to talk to, what needs to happen, and what you need to do in order to get everybody on the same page to get that deal across the line. And that essentially allows you to get ahead of possible roadblocks, not on your side, but on their side, because that way you have time to inform everybody and highlight the fact that something is coming down the pipe. Another important thing, and this is predominantly on your side, is to really steel yourself. And what I simply mean by that is that you have to upskill yourself as well. Now, more so than ever, because you can't rely on people sitting next to you necessarily, you have to be able to over communicate and over prepare and over inform the individual that you're speaking to. And what I simply mean by that is that you yourself become a product expert. A lot of salespeople take it for granted that they know the ins and outs of their product, but they simply don't, because they're very dependent on either the teammates that are sitting around them or people from other departments that are on the product team, that might be sales engineers and the like, that they would usually involve in a conversation at some point down the road. By stealing yourself, by upskilling and preparing yourself better, you actually have the ability to position yourself as a thought leader, as an expert on a topic yourself, and that would mitigate the need on your side to include a bunch of other people that could potentially slow the process down. Again, you've got a lot of time for people to make a decision on the tool, but you don't have a lot of time on your end because people's patience are usually a little bit thinner now than it has been in the past. So the question is, of course, then, what type of metrics, what type of KPIs should I be focusing on? And there's a huge discussion right now on the side of HubSpot and also within our team on whether or not we should focus on hard KPIs or soft KPIs. The hard KPIs are fairly straightforward. You want to focus on the amount of meetings booked, the amount of deals created, the amounts of deals closed, and the total metrics in terms of activities. So email sends, phone calls had, engagements, demos, you name it. But is that nowadays, especially in this time, still a clear indication for the results that will come out of it? One of the things that has been argued over the last couple of weeks on our side is maybe we should put a higher emphasis on softer KPIs. So look at the total engagements achieved. So how many phone calls did you actually have, regardless of what the result of that was? Do we maybe want to focus on the amount of information or the data collected when we had an engagement? And what we mean by that is, just because there isn't a deal that came out of it directly, if the fit of the company or the account or the individual is high, maybe we're able to sort of lay the seed or plant the seed now for something that we can pick up on in the future. And that feeds into the future deals identified. Can we already have conversations now with people that acknowledge that their investment or their capabilities to invest in the products that we're selling to them now aren't really in line with what they can, but that we can use as a way to loop back into once we go back to that normal or go back into that growth stage. And another way that we can measure, or another soft KPI that is potentially good, and that what we've been focusing on the side of HubSpot within our team, is the product expertise. Now, so more than ever, I've received more invitations than in the 3 years prior to this from our product team, our sales engineer team, to really upscale and make ourselves a better, well-rounded individual in terms of understanding what a tool is all about, so that when we actually get on the call with an individual, we can actually hold our own ground and become an expert on the product that we're trying to sell. One of the ways to do this, of course, and I'll go through this fairly quickly, is to leverage the full tech stack, and better yet, if it's all in one, something like HubSpot is a great example for that. But that's hopefully something that some of you will either engage with Thijs at Webs or me on after this meeting. But it really comes down to being able to have a marketing platform with a CRM, use tools that are at your disposal for video outreach, a sales solution in order to track and identify what is happening, but also the ability to create video conferencing, and also importantly, internal communication software. Tools that would allow you to create and enable a team feeling, even at a distance from one another, to try and generate a positive environment for you to be working on, even if your total displacement from where you sleep to where you work, like me, is about 1.5 meters, 2 meters. A way that this could look is to apply the HubSpot flywheel. Again, I don't want to dive too much into this, but it essentially allows you then to centralize all your data to make smarter, better decisions ultimately, and understand exactly what you need to focus your time and energy on to create deals. To round everything up, really the best way to actually level up your process now more than ever would be to really have the first 3 steps and apply the 4th step in order to recycle it and apply it again over and over and over again. Start by defining your strategy. Work out the bits that define the success in your role. Really understand what it is that your prospects, your leads, your accounts are going through right now, and how you can best use that as a leveraging point to get in touch with them. Build out a virtual ecosystem that you could use as a starting point to either identify where the opportunities are, but also to double down and get them on the phone. And don't be afraid to get clinical with them. So again, think of the example I showed with the email. Don't be afraid to send a personalized email to a decision maker. Don't be afraid to take it a step further than you normally would, because you'll most likely be able to have a very tailored, a personalized approach for them and have them get back to you. And don't be afraid to build rapport with these individuals. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. We recognize that we're all going through the same motion as everything, all the news outlets around the world have been saying, we're all going through this together. Don't be afraid to sort of double down on that fact and point that out, because that allows you to create a setting that would make it more comfortable for you to transition into a sales related conversation. And at the end, don't be afraid to overshare and analyze your successes, and importantly, your failures as well. Because only by looking at the failures that you've had or that the other individuals in your team have had, are you then able to recognize not just what you should do, but also what you shouldn't do in order to get to that next step. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Martijn. Great insights. We got some questions for you to finish this up, so that's great. A question from Ruben. Do you nowadays focus more on a conversion like a reply on your email, or on a CTA like book a meeting in your outreach mails and prospecting?
Yeah, I think it's more balanced. In the past, it was really focused on having someone book a meeting directly. But now I don't mind going that extra mile to get them to respond to me via email. And I usually know that if somebody gets back to me with an email, usually means that they took the time to read it and type that email out. So they'll most likely want to do it again. So, any engagement back, especially now, is valuable, is worth a little bit of gold in my opinion.
Okay, cool. Question from Wout. How do you measure your KPIs of, for example, product knowledge of sales?
So on the side of HubSpot specifically, we have a digital academy with resources and trainings and that type of stuff. And you actually have a bunch of exams where you get certificates. One of the things that you could do, for example, is set a weekly goal for yourself. I want to become an expert on these two functionalities or tools. And don't set a definite timeline in terms of days, but say by the end of the week, I want to follow or complete maybe 1 or 2 achievements or have a better understanding of something, and do it in the sense of, or try to find something where you can maybe test yourself on, that you can see a result or a metric on. And that's maybe something that you could also promote internally on your side. Say, hey guys, I know this might not be interesting or relevant to every single one of you, but I just completed this training, and it holds that accountability on your side, and also gives you the ability to give that little checkbox for yourself that you've completed something relevant or valuable.
Yeah, so it's not like a hard KPI in your team, but it's more also from like your own perspective, like how do you enable yourself with enough information or product information in order to close your deals?
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. 2 more minutes, then I am going to use those, at least half of them, by thanking you very much, Martijn, for joining us today. It was a very impressive presentation with very nice insights on how to keep calm and keep building our pipelines on remote. So thank you for that. I would like to thank everybody for joining today. This was our 6th episode, as I already explained. The 7th is coming up next week. We will have Annika from Swipe Guide, an award-winning SaaS company. She will talk about powerful marketing to generate growth. So after these great sales insights of today, we go to a more marketing approach next week. So I'd like to invite you for that. It's very interesting in order to check out how you can grow in these times with marketing leads. Because Martijn, you will agree, when we have great leads from marketing, it will make our job easier, right?
Absolutely.
All right. That was it for today. Have a great day today, and we see each other next week, hopefully. And thank you again for joining, and thank you, Anna and you, for putting this all up. Bye, guys.
Thanks, guys. Bye.